Take those fake medals off before I rip them off myself. People like you don't earn uniforms like that, they steal them.
Officer, verify my military identification before you accuse me of something you haven't bothered to investigate.
Don't lecture me. I know a fraud the second I see one, and you're fooling nobody standing here.
Commander Adrian Mercer never bent, never argued, and never reached for the medals scattered at his feet.
Get on your knees before I put you there myself. Then everyone can watch another fake hero exposed.
I'm asking for your supervisor because you're making a mistake that doesn't have to happen.
Holloway grabbed his arm, forced him onto one knee, and tightened the handcuffs as shoppers raised their phones. Officer Holloway had no idea the man he was humiliating commanded the 30 Navy SEALs already walking toward the mall behind him. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Hawthorne Galleria Mall parking lot as Commander Adrian Mercer stepped out of his sedan. His navy dress blue uniform was immaculate, every ribbon precisely aligned, every crease sharp enough to cut paper. The weight of his father's Purple Heart medal case in his left hand felt heavier than usual today. Adrian walked toward the mall entrance where a small crowd had gathered for the Veterans Scholarship Ceremony. Red, white, and blue banners hung from the storefront windows. A podium waited near the main doors, flanked by American flags that barely stirred in the still air. "Hold it right there." The voice cut through the morning quiet like a blade. Adrian stopped and turned. Officer Travis Holloway stood beside a black and white patrol car, his hand resting on his belt. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with pale skin that looked like it had never seen honest work under the sun. His eyes held the cold gleam of someone who enjoyed using his badge. "Something I can help you with, officer?" Adrian kept his voice steady. Professional. Holloway stepped closer, his boots scraping against the asphalt. "Yeah, you can start by explaining where you got that uniform." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. Around them, shoppers began to slow their pace. Cell phones appeared in hands. The ceremony crowd turned to look. "My name is Commander Adrian Mercer, United States Navy. I'm here for the scholarship dedication." "Is that so?" Holloway's voice dripped with mock surprise. "Funny thing about stolen valor, Commander. Makes a man think he can just dress up and play hero." Officer Derek Sloan appeared from behind the patrol car. He was smaller than Holloway, with nervous eyes that kept darting toward the growing crowd. Sloan positioned himself at an angle that blocked several security cameras mounted on nearby light poles. "I have my military identification." Adrian reached slowly toward his inner pocket. "Along with my invitation to today's ceremony." "Keep your hands where I can see them," Holloway barked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Adrian raised both hands, palms open. The metal case caught the sunlight. "Officer, I'm reaching for my wallet." Nothing else. From the mall entrance, a man in a dark suit approached. Nolan Price, the security director, moved with the predatory confidence of someone who knew exactly what was happening. He stopped near Holloway and whispered something into his earpiece. "See, here's what I think happened," Holloway announced to the crowd. "I think you found yourself a pretty uniform somewhere. Maybe bought it online. Figured you'd come down here and impress some folks." The accusation hit like a slap. Adrian felt his breathing deepen the way it did before combat, but he kept his voice level. "Officer Holloway, if you'll examine my identification—" "I don't need to examine anything." Holloway stepped closer, invading Adrian's personal space. "What I see is a man pretending to be something he's not. And that makes me wonder what else you might be lying about." More phones appeared. The crowd grew larger. Adrian noticed how Price kept whispering into his earpiece, coordinating something. How Sloan had moved to block another camera angle. This wasn't random. This was planned. "I'm requesting a supervisor," Adrian said clearly, projecting his voice for the recording phones. "And I'm asking you to verify my identity through proper channels." Holloway's face twisted with contempt. "You don't get to make requests, boy. You get to answer questions. The word hung in the air like poison. Adrian felt the familiar fire rise in his chest, the same anger that had driven him through 3 combat deployments. But he breathed through it, counted to 3. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Dignity can't be taken from you, only given away. Officer, I'm remaining calm and cooperative, Adrian said loud enough for every recording device to capture. I'm asking you to contact your supervisor and verify my identity before this situation escalates unnecessarily. Sloan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Holloway and the crowd. Price nodded approvingly from his position near the mall entrance, still speaking into his earpiece. Holloway's hand moved to his cuffs. The only thing escalating here is your attitude, hero. Now I'm going to ask you one more time. Where did you get that uniform? From the United States Navy, Adrian replied without hesitation. After 16 years of honorable service to my country. 16 years? Holloway laughed, a harsh sound that carried across the parking lot. Boy, the only thing you've been serving is time. And now you're serving up lies. The crowd pressed closer. Adrian could hear whispers, angry murmurs from people who recognized the ceremony setup, who knew something was wrong with this picture. I'm going to need you to get on your knees, Holloway commanded, his voice rising. Hands behind your head. On what charges? Adrian's voice remained controlled, but steel crept into his tone. Stolen valor. Impersonating a military officer. And whatever else I decide to add. Adrian didn't move. Officer, I'm asking one final time for you to contact a supervisor and verify my identity before taking any action that might— Holloway stepped forward and backhanded the metal case from Adrian's grip. The case hit the asphalt with a metallic crash, popping open. His father's Purple Heart skittered across the pavement. On your knees, now. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted. Adrian stared at his father's medal lying on the dirty asphalt, and something cold and terrible settled in his chest. Holloway reached for his handcuffs, his other hand moving toward Adrian's shoulder. The ceremony crowd pushed closer, cell phones recording everything. Adrian's knees hit the asphalt hard. The pain shot through his left leg where shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone during the Kandahar extraction. Holloway's grip twisted his right wrist backward, sending fire up his arm. You're under arrest for stolen valor and resisting an officer, Holloway shouted, his voice carrying across the parking lot like a battle cry meant to draw attention. Officer, that hold is aggravating a combat injury, Adrian said through gritted teeth. His voice stayed level despite the pain. I need you to adjust your grip. Holloway yanked harder, forcing Adrian's arm up between his shoulder blades. Combat injury? The only combat you've seen is fighting the cops, boy. The knee drove between Adrian's shoulders, pinning him to the ground. His dress uniform scraped against the rough asphalt. People gasped from the crowd. More phones came up, recording everything. Sloan moved closer, his hand covering his body camera. A small click echoed as he switched it off. He threatened us, Sloan called out to the witnesses, his voice shaking slightly. Before you all got here, he said he was going to hurt us if we didn't back off. Lies, clean, practiced lies delivered with just enough fear to sound believable. That's not true, someone shouted from the crowd. Nolan Price stepped forward from his position near the mall entrance. Everyone needs to move back, he commanded, gesturing to 2 mall security guards. This is a police matter. No filming on mall property. The guards started pushing forward, trying to create a barrier between the arrest and the witnesses. People stumbled backward, but several refused to leave. Phones stayed up despite the pressure. I'm not leaving, a woman's voice cut through the chaos. Adrian couldn't see her face from his position on the ground, but her voice was young, determined. I'm recording from the public sidewalk. You can't make me stop. Ma'am, you need to— one of the guards started. No, I'm staying right here. Holloway pressed harder into Adrian's back. "Look at this costume," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. His free hand grabbed at the ribbon rack on Adrian's chest. "Bet you bought all this garbage online, didn't you?" The bronze star ribbon tore loose with a soft, ripping sound. Adrian felt something twist in his chest, watching the red, white, and blue fabric flutter to the asphalt. "Where'd you get these fake medals, hero?" Holloway's knee dug deeper. "Amazon? eBay? Some costume shop?" Adrian didn't answer. Instead, he memorized the license plate on Holloway's patrol car, the make and model of Price's radio, the faces in the crowd, the security cameras mounted on the mall's exterior walls, the angles, the exits, the positioning of every witness. This wasn't random harassment. This was too organized, too prepared. The woman with the phone, Maya, someone had called her, stepped closer despite the guards trying to block her path. "Everyone can see what you're doing," she called out. "The whole world is watching." "Shut up and back off," Holloway snarled without looking up from Adrian. More ribbon tore, the combat action. Ribbon joined the bronze star on the dirty ground. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he remained still. Every instinct screamed to fight back, to use the training that could put both officers on the ground in seconds. But that would only prove their lies. "Admit it," Holloway demanded, wrenching Adrian's arm higher. "Tell everyone you're a fraud. Tell them you bought this uniform and these fake medals to scam people." Adrian said nothing. The pain in his shoulder was getting worse, but he focused past it. More details. The small earpiece in Price's ear. The way Sloane kept glancing toward the parking lot entrance. The coordinated timing of it all. Then he heard them. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving in formation across the asphalt with the unmistakable rhythm of military precision. The crowd turned. Gasps rippled through the witnesses. Even Holloway's grip loosened slightly as heads swiveled toward the sound. 30 men in desert combat uniforms moved across the parking lot in perfect formation. Navy SEALs, their insignia visible even from a distance. At their head walked a man Adrian recognized immediately. Captain Solomon Vance, his weathered face set like granite. The formation stopped 10 feet behind where Adrian knelt. 30 pairs of boots hit the asphalt in unison. "Remove your hands from our commanding officer." Solomon's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Now." The parking lot fell silent except for the soft flutter of flags on nearby light poles. Solomon Vance stepped forward, his weathered face calm, but his eyes burning with controlled fury. He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a leather credential case. "Captain Solomon Vance, United States Navy SEALs," he announced, flipping open the case for Holloway to see. "This is Commander Adrian Mercer. He holds the Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and Navy Cross. 3 years ago, his tactical planning saved my entire unit during a botched extraction in Somalia." Holloway's grip loosened slightly, uncertainty flickering across his face. Behind him, the 30 SEALs remained motionless, their presence like a wall of controlled violence. But then Nolan Price stepped closer, his hand moving to his radio. A subtle gesture, barely a nod, passed between him and Holloway. "Doesn't matter who he claims to be," Holloway said, tightening his grip again. "Your boy here assaulted an officer before you showed up." "That's a lie," Maya called out from the crowd. Sloane stepped forward, his voice shaky but determined. "We have a witness complaint, filed this morning." He fumbled for his notepad, reading from hastily scrawled notes. "Store employee says this man was soliciting money in uniform, harassing customers outside the entrance." Price produced a folded paper from his jacket. "Official complaint form," he announced, "signed by Jennifer Martinez, mall employee." Adrian's eyes narrowed as he caught sight of the signature. Jennifer Martinez. He remembered her from his father's funeral 8 months ago. She'd worked at the bookstore for 15 years, always kind to the veterans who gathered there for coffee. She'd also died 3 months ago from cancer. That's forged, Adrian said quietly. Jennifer Martinez has been dead since March. Price's face didn't change, but his hand tightened on the paper. You calling me a liar? I'm calling you exactly what you are. Solomon stepped closer, his voice carrying the authority of decades in command. I want all body camera footage preserved. Mall surveillance too, every angle, every second, from 1 hour before this incident started. We'll handle evidence collection, Price said smoothly. No, Solomon replied. Independent preservation, third-party custody. This stops being your show right now. Holloway's response was to click the handcuffs tighter. Adrian's jaw clenched as the metal bit into his wrists. Backup's coming, Holloway announced into his radio. Need additional units for crowd control. Multiple suspects refusing to disperse. The 30 SEALs shifted slightly, muscles tensing. Adrian could feel the violence building like pressure before a storm. One word from him, and this parking lot would become a battlefield. Stand down, Adrian commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. All of you, stand down. The SEALs obeyed immediately, demonstrating the discipline Holloway clearly lacked. The contrast was obvious to everyone watching. 30 elite warriors following orders, while 2 cops escalated a routine encounter into chaos. Maya edged closer to Solomon, pretending to adjust her phone. She pressed a small piece of paper into his palm and whispered, I recorded everything. Call me. In the distance, news vans appeared, drawn by social media posts about the scholarship ceremony. The mall's Veterans Hall buzzed with tension as Adrian pushed through the entrance doors. Camera flashes exploded around him like small bombs. The 30 SEALs flanked him in perfect formation, their combat boots echoing against polished floors in synchronized rhythm. Commander Mercer? A reporter thrust a microphone forward. Are you going to proceed with the ceremony after what just happened? Adrian straightened his uniform jacket, his jaw set like granite. My father served this country with honor. His memory won't be tarnished by corrupt cops and false accusations. The hall stretched before them, polished marble floors, gleaming display cases filled with medals and photographs, and a raised platform decorated with red, white, and blue banners. At the far end, a large projection screen displayed the scholarship announcement. The crowd parted as Adrian walked through, some faces showing support, others uncertainty. Elena Mercer stepped beside her brother, her sharp eyes scanning the room like a predator hunting weakness. As a forensic accountant, she'd learned to spot financial irregularities hidden in plain sight. Now, she applied those same skills to human behavior. 10 o'clock, she whispered to Adrian, by the service corridor. Graham Weller stood near a restricted entrance marked Staff Only, his expensive suit and practiced smile making him look like every other politician at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, but his body language told a different story. His conversation with Police Chief Calvin Dorsey was urgent, heated. Their voices carried just enough for Elena to catch fragments. Should have waited until after. Too late now. Damages. Clean this up before. Nolan Price joined them, his security uniform crisp and professional, but his face flushed with anger. He gestured sharply toward Adrian, then pulled out his phone and showed them something on the screen. Elena memorized their positions, their expressions, their obvious panic. These men weren't random officials showing support for veterans. They were conspirators, watching their plans unravel. Adrian reached the podium and adjusted the microphone. The crowd settled into expectant silence, cameras rolling, phones recording. He pulled his prepared speech from his jacket, then looked up at the faces before him, veterans, families, community leaders, and scattered throughout the crowd, the steady presence of his SEAL brothers. 8 months ago, we lost Isaiah Mercer, Adrian began, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded men in combat zones. My father believed in justice. He believed in accountability. He believed that America's promises to its veterans should be kept, not stolen by corrupt. The projection screen flickered. Adrian's image vanished, replaced by grainy security footage. The audio crackled as an edited clip began playing. Adrian's voice distorted, his words chopped and spliced together to make him sound threatening, aggressive. "Don't care about your authority. Take what's mine. Won't stop until—" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped. A veteran near the back shook his head in disappointment. The editing was crude, but effective. Adrian appeared to be making threats, challenging police authority, confirming every stereotype about angry military men. Adrian's hands clenched at his sides, but his voice remained steady. "Technical difficulties," he said into the microphone. "Seems like someone doesn't want you to hear the truth." Maya Brooks stood up from her seat in the third row. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice cut through the whispers like a blade. "I have the full recording," she announced, holding up her phone. "Complete and unedited. That clip is fake." Every head turned toward her. Price immediately pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with rage. "Ma'am, that device contains evidence in an active investigation." Solomon Vance moved like lightning, positioning himself between Price and Maya. "She's under our protection," he said quietly, but his voice carried absolute finality. Price stopped, his hand halfway to Maya's phone. Around the room, 30 SEALs shifted imperceptibly, ready to back their captain's decision. The mall security director found himself facing trained killers who'd sworn to protect innocent witnesses. "The truth always comes out," Adrian said from the podium. His voice echoed off the walls, reaching every corner of the hall. "My father understood that. It's why they killed him." More gasps. Elena watched Graham Weller's face go pale. Adrian pulled out the forged complaint form and held it up for everyone to see. "This document claims my father was a fraud, filed by a dead woman, signed with a fake signature." He reached into his jacket again and withdrew a yellowed paper his father had left in his desk drawer. "But look at this letterhead. Same address. Same shell company." Elena stepped closer, her accountant's eye catching details others missed. The complaint form listed Metropolitan Development Solutions as a contact address. The paper from Isaiah's files showed the same company name, same post office box, but dated 3 years earlier. "Someone's been planning this for a long time," Elena said, loud enough for the cameras to catch. "They knew exactly how to discredit him." Graham Weller whispered urgently to Dorsey, then both men began moving toward the exit. But the crowd blocked their path, everyone pressing closer to hear Adrian's words. The ceremony continued, but the mood had shifted from celebration to revelation. Adrian spoke about his father's service, his investigations into veterans' housing fraud, his suspicious death on a rainy night 8 months ago. With each word, the picture became clearer. Isaiah Mercer hadn't died in an accident. He'd been murdered. When the formal remarks ended, Elena approached the memorial display where Isaiah's bronze star and purple heart lay in an ornate wooden case. She'd avoided opening it since the funeral, the grief too raw. But now, with cameras watching and truth demanding action, she lifted the velvet-lined lid. Beneath the medals, hidden in a small compartment she'd never noticed, lay a brass key attached to a tag. Elena's breath caught as she read the faded handwriting, "Veterans Cooperative, Original Deeds." Across the hall, Graham Weller stopped his retreat to the exit. His eyes fixed on the key in Elena's hands, his face shifting from politician's smile to predator's snarl. The expensive suit couldn't hide what he really was anymore. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the industrial district as Adrian pulled his rental car into the gravel lot outside secure store facilities. The storage complex stretched across 2 acres of cracked asphalt, rows of metal buildings baking in the heat. Unit 47B sat at the far end, tucked between a rusted chain-link fence and an abandoned loading dock. Elena clutched the brass key her father had hidden beneath his medals. Her knuckles were white. "I should have come here months ago," she whispered. "You couldn't have known," Rebecca Hale said from the back seat. The civil rights attorney had insisted on joining them, her briefcase full of evidence preservation forms and legal documents. Grief doesn't follow timelines. Solomon Vance stepped out first, his trained eyes scanning the surrounding buildings for threats. Old habits from overseas tours never died. "Looks quiet," he reported, but his hand stayed near his concealed weapon. They approached the storage unit as a team. Adrian immediately noticed the scratches around the lock mechanism, fresh gouges in the metal, small shavings scattered on the concrete. Someone had tried to pick it recently. "They've been here," he said, photographing the damage with his phone. Each image was methodical, documenting angles and evidence like a crime scene investigation. Question is whether they got inside. Elena inserted the key. The lock clicked open with a satisfying thud. The corrugated metal door rolled up to reveal chaos. Boxes had been opened and carelessly resealed. File cabinets stood with drawers pulled out at odd angles. Tools lay scattered across the floor instead of hanging on their designated hooks. Someone had searched this place thoroughly, but tried to hide their intrusion. "Don't touch anything yet," Adrian commanded. He moved through the unit like a detective, photographing every disturbance before they contaminated the scene. Flash after flash captured overturned boxes, rifled papers, disturbed dust patterns. Elena waited until he finished, then went straight to their father's workbench. Isaiah had been a mechanic his entire adult life. Every tool had its place, every drawer was labeled and organized, but the heavy chest beneath the workbench looked untouched. "They missed this," she said, running her fingers along the worn wood surface. Solomon helped her lift the chest onto the workbench. It seemed like an ordinary toolbox, heavy, practical, built to last decades. But when Elena pressed two specific corners simultaneously, a hidden panel clicked open at the bottom. Inside lay documents that would change everything. Property deeds dating back to 1967. Purchase agreements signed by 12 black veterans, pooling their savings to buy 43 acres of farmland outside town. Payment receipts showing monthly contributions to a cooperative fund. Maps indicating the exact boundaries of their collective property. The land where Hawthorne Galleria Mall now generated millions in annual revenue. Rebecca spread the papers across the workbench, her attorney's training evident in how she handled each document. "This is ironclad," she breathed. "Legal ownership, properly filed with the county. These men bought this land fair and square." Elena found more evidence deeper in the compartment. Payment ledgers in her father's careful handwriting, tracking money transfers between Weller Development Corporation and something called the Hawthorne Police Benevolent Association. Shell companies with addresses that matched the forged complaint forms. Bank routing numbers connecting Chief Dorsey to offshore accounts. "Look at this," Elena said, holding up a cassette tape labeled "Insurance, Final Warning." Adrian found an old boombox on a nearby shelf and inserted the tape. Static crackled, then Isaiah's voice filled the storage unit, calm but determined. "This is for my children, in case something happens to me. Today is March 15th. Nolan Price came to my house again. He said if I don't stop asking questions about the veterans' land, I might have an accident like Eddie Washington did last year. He was very specific about the threats. Said Chief Dorsey has ways of making problems disappear." The recording continued for 20 minutes, Isaiah methodically naming corrupt officials, documenting bribes, describing how the land theft had been covered up through fraudulent probate proceedings and forged death certificates. His voice never wavered, even when describing direct threats against his life. "Price runs security for the mall," Isaiah's voice explained, But he's really Weller's enforcer. Make sure witnesses stay quiet, make sure documents disappear, and if someone won't cooperate. The lights went out. Emergency strips along the ceiling died instantly, plunging the storage unit into darkness. Through the open door, they could see the entire facility had lost power. In the sudden silence, footsteps crunched on gravel. 3 figures in black masks appeared at the entrance, moving with tactical precision. They carried crowbars instead of guns. This was meant to look like a robbery, not an execution. Adrian reacted first. His military training kicked in as he grabbed the nearest heavy tool and hurled it at the lead attacker. The wrench caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him sideways and buying precious seconds. Solomon moved like a shadow, using the darkness to his advantage. He caught the second attacker from behind, wrapping his arm around the man's throat and applying pressure until the body went limp. No killing, but the man wouldn't wake up for hours. The third attacker swung wildly with his crowbar, connecting with storage boxes and metal shelving but missing his targets. Adrian closed the distance, using close-quarters combat techniques to disarm and disable him. A quick strike to the solar plexus, followed by a knee to the jaw as the man doubled over. But as they fought, a fourth figure appeared at the rear entrance, someone they hadn't seen approaching. This one carried a gas canister and immediately began spraying accelerant across the storage unit walls. "Fire!" Rebecca shouted, grabbing the property deeds and stuffing them into her briefcase. Elena lunged for the cassette player, yanking the tape free just as flames erupted along the back wall. The accelerant caught fast, turning the storage space into an inferno within seconds. They retreated through the front entrance as smoke filled their lungs. Adrian dragged one unconscious attacker to safety. They'd need him for questioning. Solomon carried the other. But the arsonist vanished into the maze of storage buildings, leaving only the growing flames behind. Fire trucks arrived just as the sun touched the horizon, their sirens wailing across the industrial district. Adrian watched the firefighters battle the blaze that consumed his father's hidden sanctuary. But they'd saved what mattered most. As paramedics checked the unconscious attackers, Adrian searched their pockets for identification. The first man carried nothing useful: cash, keys, generic wallet. But the second attacker's jacket contained a plastic badge that made Adrian's blood run cold. "Holloway Private Security," he read aloud. "Employee ID number 847. Solomon leaned over his shoulder to read the badge. "That's not a coincidence." "No," Adrian said grimly, pocketing the identification. "Travis Holloway wasn't just a racist cop having a bad day. This whole thing was planned from the beginning." Police sirens wailed across the industrial district as 3 squad cars pulled into the storage facility parking lot. Chief Calvin Dorsey climbed out of the lead vehicle, his silver hair catching the orange glow from the dying flames. Behind him, Officers Sloan and 2 others spread out in a practiced formation. Adrian stood beside the unconscious attacker, still holding the Holloway Private Security badge. The evidence briefcase sat at Rebecca's feet, protected by federal authority that Dorsey couldn't simply brush aside. "Commander Mercer," Dorsey called out, his tone carrying false concern. "Looks like you've had quite an evening. We'll need to take custody of any evidence and this suspect for proper processing." "No." Adrian's voice cut through the smoky air. "Not without documented chain of custody procedures." Dorsey's jaw tightened. "Son, you're interfering with an active police investigation. This is a federal matter now." Rebecca stepped forward, pulling out official paperwork. "I've secured an emergency evidence hold through the district court. All materials related to this incident remain under federal protection until proper jurisdiction is established." The fire chief approached their group, wiping soot from his hands. "Arson for sure. Accelerant pattern shows multiple ignition points. Professional job." "Professional," Solomon repeated, staring directly at Dorsey. "Just like the attack on Adrian's storage unit." Dorsey's face reddened. "Are you accusing my department of—" I'm stating facts. Rebecca's voice remained steady. This evidence stays in federal custody. Any attempt to interfere will result in obstruction charges. The captured attacker stirred on the stretcher as paramedics checked his vitals. His eyes opened slowly, focusing on Adrian with surprising clarity despite the head injury. "Bell," the man whispered hoarsely. "Marcus Bell." Adrian knelt beside the stretcher. "You work for Holloway?" Bell nodded weakly. "Listen, your father's crash wasn't no accident. They staged it, made it look like he fell asleep at the wheel, but—" His voice faded as pain medication kicked in. "But what?" Adrian pressed. "Who else knows? There's another witness, someone who saw. That's enough." Sloane suddenly appeared, pushing between Adrian and the stretcher. "This man needs medical attention, not interrogation." Before Bell could continue, Sloane signaled the paramedics to load him into a police cruiser instead of the ambulance. "Head injuries can be tricky. We'll transport him ourselves to ensure proper custody." Adrian watched Sloane check the rear door locks twice, testing the handles with deliberate precision. Something cold settled in his chest. "Solomon," he said quietly, "follow that cruiser. Stay back, but don't lose it." "What about the evidence?" Elena asked, clutching her briefcase tightly. "Take it to Rebecca's office," Adrian ordered. "Full security. Federal protection." As the police convoy prepared to leave, Adrian gathered 4 SEALs with hand signals. They would follow the official vehicles at a distance, using different routes to avoid detection. The convoy pulled out onto the main road, red and blue lights flashing in the growing darkness. Adrian and his team followed in 2 unmarked vehicles, maintaining visual contact as the cruisers headed toward downtown. But after 10 minutes, something changed. Instead of continuing toward the county jail, Sloane's cruiser suddenly veered left onto Industrial Boulevard. The other police units peeled away, leaving Bell's transport alone on the darkened road. "That's not the way to lock up," one of the SEALs observed through their radio. Adrian accelerated slightly, closing the distance. The cruiser ahead was moving through an abandoned warehouse district, past empty loading docks and rusted chain-link fences. His blood turned to ice as Bell's cruiser swerved through an open gate into a sprawling warehouse complex. Through the windshield, Adrian could see armed figures in tactical gear waiting inside. And standing in the center of the group, checking his service weapon with casual precision, was Travis Holloway himself. Adrian killed the engine 50 yards from the warehouse entrance, studying the tactical situation through the darkness. The building stretched across 2 city blocks, its broken windows creating jagged teeth against the orange glow of security lights. 4 armed contractors moved in lazy patrols around the perimeter, their weapons casual but ready. 2 exits on the east side, Solomon whispered, pointing toward loading docks barely visible in the shadows. Another on the north wall behind those shipping containers. Adrian nodded, activating his radio. "Delta Team, seal the rear exits. Charlie Team, find elevated positions with clear sight lines. Nobody moves until I give the signal." Through a shattered second-floor window, Adrian could see movement inside the main warehouse floor. Holloway stood beneath harsh fluorescent lights, his uniform crisp despite the late hour. Sloane lingered near a stack of wooden crates, shifting his weight nervously as 2 contractors dragged Marcus Bell between them. "Where's the second ledger, Marcus?" Holloway's voice carried clearly through the broken glass. "Your friend Isaiah was real careful about keeping records. We found 1 set, but there's always a backup." Bell's head lolled forward, blood streaming from his nose. "Don't know what you're talking about." Holloway backhanded him across the face with calculated brutality. "Wrong answer. See, your old man documented everything. Bank transfers, property deeds, witness statements. We need to know where he hid the rest." Adrian counted guard positions methodically. 2 contractors flanked the main entrance. Another pair patrolled the loading bays. Sloane kept checking his phone, his body language screaming reluctance. Through the radio, Lila Grant's voice crackled with federal authority. 10 minutes out with backup units, she reported. Maintain surveillance, but do not engage until we arrive. Adrian ignored the order. Bell wouldn't last 10 minutes under Holloway's interrogation. Solomon, take Sloan when I move. 2 contractors in the northwest corner, armed with assault rifles. 3rd man near the fuse box on the west wall. Adrian slipped from the vehicle, staying low as he circled toward the building's rear. The exterior security lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows between rusted machinery and abandoned loading equipment. He located the electrical junction box behind a cluster of shipping containers and systematically cut power to each section. One by one, the perimeter lights went dark. Inside the warehouse, Holloway's interrogation continued with increasing violence. You think loyalty to dead men means something, Marcus? Your friend Isaiah thought the same thing. Look how that ended for him. Bell raised his head defiantly despite the blood. He was worth 10 of you. Holloway drew his service weapon and pressed it against Bell's kneecap. Last chance. Where's the backup ledger? Go to hell. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse as Adrian reached the roof access ladder. He hauled himself up quickly, his boots silent on the metal rungs. The rooftop access door had been propped open with a concrete block, likely for ventilation during the building's operational years. Adrian dropped through the opening into darkness, landing on a catwalk that overlooked the main floor. 20 feet below, Holloway circled Bell like a predator, while Sloan stood frozen near the loading equipment. "Derek, get the bolt cutters," Holloway ordered. "If he won't talk, we'll start removing fingers." Sloan's voice cracked with obvious reluctance. "Travis, maybe we should—" "Should what? Show mercy? This bastard's been feeding information to Mercer for weeks. He knows where Isaiah hid the evidence." Adrian moved along the catwalk until he was directly above 2 contractors guarding the rear entrance. He dropped silently behind them, using a sleeper hold to take down the first man before the second could turn around. The second contractor managed one surprised grunt before Adrian's chokehold sent him unconscious to the concrete floor. The warehouse erupted into chaos as Solomon burst through the main entrance, his weapon trained on Sloan. "Police! Drop your weapons!" Holloway spun toward the sound, his gun swinging away from Bell. That split second of distraction was all Adrian needed. He vaulted over the catwalk railing, landing hard among the loading cages and machinery that dominated the warehouse floor. The close-quarters fight exploded instantly. Adrian rolled behind a massive hydraulic lift as gunfire rang out, bullets sparking off metal surfaces and concrete pillars. Holloway's remaining contractors took cover behind shipping crates, their muzzle flashes strobing through the darkness. Adrian used the machinery as cover, moving between conveyor belts and loading equipment while drawing fire away from Bell. A contractor emerged from behind a forklift, assault rifle raised, but Adrian was already moving. He tackled the man into a stack of wooden pallets, driving his elbow into the contractor's throat before wrestling the weapon away. "Sloan!" Solomon's voice carried over the gunfire. "Put the weapon down. Federal agents are en route." But Sloan hesitated, his service pistol wavering between Solomon and the floor. That hesitation cost him. Solomon closed the distance in 3 quick steps, disarming Sloan with a practiced wrist twist before driving him face first into the concrete. Holloway retreated toward the loading docks, firing wild shots to cover his escape. "This isn't over, Mercer!" he screamed. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Adrian reached Bell as Holloway's boots echoed on the metal loading dock. Bell was conscious but bleeding heavily from a shoulder wound where Holloway's second shot had found its mark. "Can you walk?" Adrian asked, cutting Bell's restraints with a tactical knife. Bell nodded grimly. "Your father's second ledger. It's in a safety deposit box. Bank of America on 5th Street. Account numbers tattooed inside my forearm. The sound of an engine roaring to life echoed from the loading bay. Through the open dock doors, Adrian saw Holloway climbing into an armored SUV, its engine already running. The vehicle lurched forward, tires screeching on concrete as it headed for the street. Adrian spotted Bell's transport van parked near the side entrance, keys still hanging from the ignition. He helped Bell to his feet and half-carried him toward the vehicle while Solomon secured Sloan with zip ties. "Solomon, we're mobile." Solomon joined them as Adrian started the engine, the van's headlights cutting through the warehouse darkness. They burst through the side exit just as Holloway's SUV disappeared around a corner onto Industrial Boulevard. The chase began immediately. Holloway had a 30-second head start, but his armored vehicle was heavy and slow compared to Bell's lighter transport van. Adrian floored the accelerator, his tactical training taking over as he calculated angles and closing distances. "Elena, you monitoring police frequencies?" Adrian called through the radio. Elena's voice crackled back from Rebecca's office. "3 roadblocks being staged on your current route. Take the next right onto Commerce Street, then left on Riverside. Avoid the main arteries." Adrian followed her guidance, weaving through narrow service roads that paralleled the downtown core. Ahead, Holloway's SUV ran red lights and sideswiped parked cars in its desperate flight toward the riverfront. The pursuit screamed through empty streets, past closed storefronts and abandoned lots. Adrian gained ground at each turn, his knowledge of the city's layout allowing him to anticipate Holloway's route toward the industrial waterfront. Then disaster struck. As Adrian rounded a sharp curve onto River Road, Holloway's SUV suddenly veered sideways, forcing a city bus into oncoming traffic. The bus driver yanked his wheel hard right, sending the massive vehicle directly into Adrian's path. Adrian slammed the brakes and wrenched the steering wheel left, but physics demanded its price. The van skidded toward the bus, while 30 passengers screamed behind reinforced windows. At the last instant, Adrian chose civilian lives over justice. He abandoned the pursuit, steering into a light pole to avoid the collision. The van crumpled against metal and concrete while Holloway's armored SUV disappeared into the maze of warehouse roads leading to the riverfront. The Riverside Veterans Clinic sat quiet at 11 o'clock that evening, its small waiting room lit only by emergency lighting. Dr. Sarah Martinez had opened the facility after hours, her decades of military service compelling her to help when Captain Vance called with an encrypted request. Adrian helped Bell onto the examination table while Solomon secured the entrance. Bell's shoulder wound needed immediate attention, but his eyes remained sharp despite the pain medication Dr. Martinez administered. "Federal Agent Lila Grant," a voice announced from the doorway. Grant entered without fanfare, her credentials already visible. She wore civilian clothes and carried no backup, exactly as Solomon had requested. "I came alone, as promised. No local police involvement." Adrian studied Grant carefully. Her reputation suggested integrity, but trust came hard after everything they'd discovered. "Bell has information about my father's death. Information that goes deeper than stolen land." Bell struggled to sit upright, wincing as Dr. Martinez cleaned his wound. "Your father wasn't just investigating the Veterans Cooperative. He helped build it. Back in 1962, Isaiah Mercer was one of 3 founding members who purchased the original property through a legal trust." The room fell silent except for the hum of medical equipment. "That land was never stolen," Bell continued, his voice growing stronger. "It was legally owned by black veterans and their families, but the city condemned it through false environmental reports. Your father held the controlling legal interest for all surviving families." Adrian's hands clenched into fists. "What does that mean?" "It means you inherited that authority when Isaiah died," Grant said, her analytical mind already processing the implications. "If the original trust documents still exist, you could challenge the entire mall development." Bell nodded grimly. Graham Weller discovered that 6 months ago when his lawyers did title research for the refinancing. That's why they needed you discredited. Can't have the rightful property owner looking credible before the city council votes on the new funding. The arrest, Solomon said quietly. It was never about stolen valor. Holloway was ordered to make you look unstable, Bell confirmed. Dangerous. Unfit to represent veteran families. They needed public video of you being subdued before anyone could research your legal standing. Adrian felt rage building in his chest, but he forced it down through practiced discipline. You said there was a ledger. Something Holloway recovered from my father's crash scene. Bell's expression darkened. Nolan Price forced your father's truck off Riverside Highway on Chief Dorsey's direct orders. Made it look like an accident, but Holloway arrived first and removed documents from the wreckage before emergency crews got there. Dr. Martinez paused her work, staring at Bell in horror. You're talking about murder. Cold-blooded murder, Bell confirmed. Isaiah had compiled evidence of the original land theft, illegal payments to city officials, and falsified environmental reports. The ledger contained bank routing numbers, shell company registrations, and photographs of forged documents. Grant leaned forward, her federal training taking over. Where is this ledger now? Hawthorne Galleria has a concealed records room in the basement level, below the security office. Price keeps sensitive documents there, where city inspectors would never find them. The ledger's in a fireproof safe, along with other evidence they've been collecting for years. Adrian's tactical mind began working through possibilities. Elena, how long before the refinancing vote? Elena's voice crackled through the secure radio channel from Rebecca's office. The city council meets tomorrow evening during the Veterans fundraiser at the mall. Public ceremony starts at 6, but the actual vote happens in closed session at 8:30. Less than 24 hours. Perfect timing, Solomon muttered. Maximum public relations impact if they can portray you as a threat during a patriotic event. Adrian stood and began pacing, his mind calculating options. We're not rushing into anything blindly. Bell, you'll provide formal testimony to Agent Grant, documenting everything you've witnessed. Elena, I need you to research the original trust documents and verify our legal standing. Solomon, coordinate with your team for security during tomorrow's operation. What operation? Grant asked. We're going to retrieve that ledger through proper legal channels, Adrian replied. If I have rightful authority over that property, then I have every right to access records stored on the premises. Grant's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She read it quickly, her expression growing troubled. My federal superiors have just reassigned me to a case in Baltimore. Effective immediately. The room fell silent again, the implications clear to everyone present. Weller's influence reaches beyond the city, Grant said quietly, staring at her phone. Someone very powerful wants me away from this investigation. The blueprints spread across Rebecca's conference table looked like a maze of service corridors and hidden passages. Adrian traced his finger along the main structural lines, while Elena highlighted key access points with a red marker. There, Elena said, tapping the paper. Service Tunnel B7 connects the southeast parking structure directly to the basement level. If Bell's right about the records room being below the security office, this route bypasses all the main surveillance cameras. Rebecca looked up from her laptop where she'd been drafting emergency injunctions. The tunnel was part of the original construction in 1978. Mall management probably forgot it exists. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor, uploading her arrest video to encrypted servers across 3 different states. Her laptop screen showed progress bars crawling toward completion. That's number 7, she announced quietly. FBI whistleblower sites, civil rights organizations, independent journalists. They can't silence all of them. Agent Grant paced near the windows, speaking in hushed tones on her secure phone. Inspector General Martinez owes me a favor from the pension fraud case in Phoenix, she whispered. If I can reach her before my reassignment goes through. Adrian studied the tunnel schematics more carefully. The passage ran nearly 200 feet underground, with emergency lighting and ventilation systems that connected to the mall's main power grid. Perfect for moving unseen, but dangerous if they got trapped inside. Solomon, Adrian said, turning to his friend, take Rodriguez, Thompson, Harris, and Jackson for evidence recovery. Approach through the tunnel exactly at 0200 hours. The night security rotation changes then, giving you a 15-minute window. Solomon nodded grimly. What about witness protection? Davis and Williams stay with Elena and Maya. Peterson and Brooks secure Rebecca's family. The rest maintain perimeter surveillance and extraction routes. Dr. Martinez emerged from the adjoining room where she'd been treating Belle's injuries. He's stable, but shouldn't be moved for at least 6 hours. The internal bleeding has stopped, but those ribs need proper rest. We can't wait that long, Elena said, checking her watch. The refinancing vote. The office lights suddenly died. Emergency power kicked in 3 seconds later, casting everything in dim red illumination. Through the windows, Adrian could see the entire city block had gone dark. That's not a power grid failure, Solomon said, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. Someone cut the main lines. The sound of heavy engines rumbling in the alley behind the building made everyone freeze. Adrian moved to the rear window and peered through the blinds. 3 black contractor trucks had positioned themselves around the building's service entrance. They found us, Grant whispered, ending her call abruptly. The crash of splintering wood echoed up from the first floor. Heavy boots thundered on the stairs. Radio chatter crackled from multiple directions as armed men coordinated their approach. Elena, Maya, get to the secured conference room, Rebecca ordered, grabbing her files. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone. Adrian drew his service weapon and moved toward the stairwell. Solomon, protect the women. Grant, call for backup. Already tried, Grant said, her face pale in the red emergency lighting. Radio signals are being jammed. The stairwell door exploded inward as 3 masked figures in tactical gear rushed through. Adrian dove behind the reception desk as automatic weapons fire shattered the windows above his head. He rolled left and came up firing, putting 2 round center mass into the lead attacker. The man dropped hard, his weapon clattering across the floor. The second gunman swung his rifle toward Adrian's position, but Solomon appeared from behind and drove a combat knife between the man's shoulder blades. The attacker collapsed without a sound. The third intruder had already disappeared back into the stairwell. Adrian followed, his weapon raised and ready. In the adjoining room, Dr. Martinez screamed. Adrian spun around to see 2 more contractors dragging Marcus Bell's unconscious form through a hole they'd blown in the rear wall. "Elena!" Rebecca shouted from across the office. Adrian turned to see his sister fighting desperately as a masked figure tried to force her toward the damaged wall. She grabbed a fire extinguisher from its mount and discharged the entire contents into her attacker's face. The man stumbled backward, clawing at his eyes, and Elena broke free. But the contractors had already vanished with Bell and one of Rebecca's deed boxes. Adrian's radio crackled to life. Holloway's voice came through clearly, transmitted from Bell's confiscated phone. "Commander Mercer, I have your witness. He's bleeding pretty badly from all this excitement. Might not last much longer without proper medical attention." Background noise filtered through the transmission, soft electronic chimes, a mechanical humming sound, the distant echo of ventilation systems. "You want him alive? Bring every remaining document to Hawthorne Galleria. Come alone. You have 30 minutes. Adrian recognized those chimes immediately. He'd heard them during his arrest 2 days ago, when mall security had escorted him past the freight elevators. Bell was already beneath the mall, trapped in the same underground system they'd planned to use for evidence recovery. The medic finished cleaning the gash on Adrian's forehead and stepped back. You'll need stitches, but it can wait. Adrian nodded, his jaw tight as he studied the tactical map spread across the conference table. The emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across everyone's faces, making them look like ghosts planning a war. "We can't wait for backup," Rebecca said, her voice steady despite the chaos they'd just survived. "Every hour we delay gives them more time to destroy evidence and disappear witnesses." Elena pulled out her laptop and began typing rapidly. "I'm creating encrypted copies of everything we recovered. Multiple backups stored on secure servers. Even if they take the originals, we'll have proof." Agent Grant checked her secure phone. "The Inspector General is finally responding to my emergency contact protocol. I can restore limited federal authority, but only for 12 hours. After that, local jurisdiction takes over again." Solomon examined the building's security footage on a tablet. The attack was coordinated. They knew exactly where Bell was being treated. Someone's been feeding them information about our movements. Or they've been monitoring police radio traffic, Adrian said grimly. "Dorsey has contacts throughout emergency services. He could have been tracking our location since we left the warehouse." Rebecca stood and gathered her files. "I'm requesting an emergency injunction from Judge Morrison. She's been fair to civil rights cases before. If I can get warrants for the mall's underground areas, we can move legally." "How fast can you get those papers?" Grant asked. 2 hours, maybe less if I call in some favors." Adrian traced the mall's layout with his finger. "The service tunnel entrance is here, behind the loading dock. If we enter at dawn during the shift change, we'll have minimal security presence." Elena looked up from her screen. "The financial records show payments made every month to something called Maintenance Services, LLC. It's a shell company, but the address matches the mall's service level. They're paying someone to keep those underground rooms secure." "That's where they're holding Bell," Solomon said with certainty. "And probably where they've been storing evidence all these years." Grant's phone buzzed. "Inspector General Thompson is authorizing a federal investigation. I have temporary supervisory authority over any local law enforcement that tries to interfere." "Good," Adrian said, "but we move fast. Once we recover Bell and secure that ledger, this whole conspiracy collapses." The room fell quiet as everyone processed the plan. Outside, the city was still dark, but the eastern horizon showed the first hint of dawn approaching. Rebecca gathered her coat. "Judge Morrison lives in Riverside Heights. If I leave now, I can have those warrants signed before 6 a.m. "Elena stays here with Dr. Martinez," Adrian ordered. "Someone needs to coordinate communications and monitor police radio traffic." Elena started to protest, but Adrian cut her off. "You're the only one who can decode those financial records fast enough. We need you safe and analyzing data, not crawling through maintenance tunnels." Solomon checked his weapon and secured additional magazines. "My team will establish perimeter security around the mall. Anyone tries to interfere with federal operations, they get detained." Grant holstered her sidearm and straightened her jacket. "Once we have Bell's testimony and that ledger, I can coordinate arrests across multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. Weller, Dorsey, Price, Holloway, everyone goes down at once." Adrian felt something he hadn't experienced in days: genuine hope. The enemy had made a critical mistake by attacking Rebecca's office. They'd revealed their desperation and exposed their tactics. Now Adrian had legal authority, federal backing, and a clear target. "One more thing," he said quietly. "When we find Bell, we extract him immediately. No interrogation, no delay. His safety is the priority." Rebecca paused at the door. "What if he's too injured to provide testimony?" "Then we make sure the documents speak for themselves," Adrian replied. "Either way, by sunrise, this ends." The warrants came through at 5:47 a.m. Rebecca's emergency injunction granted federal investigators full access to Hawthorne Galleria's service levels, maintenance areas, and any locked or restricted spaces. Judge Morrison had signed the papers without hesitation, after reviewing the evidence of conspiracy and witness tampering. Adrian led the team through the service tunnel entrance exactly as planned. The dawn shift change provided perfect cover. Security guards focused on coffee and shift reports, while custodial staff prepared for another day of routine maintenance. Grant's federal authority cleared their path through any potential interference. The few mall employees they encountered received polite but firm instructions to remain in designated areas while official business was conducted. The underground maze beneath Hawthorne Galleria was more extensive than Adrian had expected. Narrow corridors lined with utility pipes and electrical conduits stretched in every direction. The air smelled of damp concrete and industrial cleaning supplies. Solomon moved ahead with tactical precision, checking corners and monitoring radio chatter. Movement ahead. 2 corridors east. They found Bell exactly where Adrian had suspected, locked inside a maintenance cage near the central electrical distribution panel. He was conscious but weak, his face pale from blood loss and dehydration. "Commander," Bell whispered as Adrian cut through the cage lock. "They took the ledger, hidden behind the false panel, just like I told you." Elena's voice crackled through Adrian's earpiece. "Police radio traffic is spiking, multiple units being dispatched to the mall." Adrian ignored the distraction and examined the electrical panel Bell had indicated. Behind a removable section marked "Authorized Personnel Only," his fingers found a metal document case wrapped in protective plastic. Inside were Isaiah Mercer's original files, property deeds, transfer documents, bank records, payment receipts, everything needed to prove decades of systematic theft and corruption. Grant photographed each page while Solomon secured Bell for medical transport. "This is exactly what we needed. Direct evidence linking Weller's companies to fraudulent land transfers and illegal payments to police officials." The arrest of Nolan Price happened 20 minutes later. Solomon's team found the mall security director in a restricted access corridor, carrying 2 additional boxes of Isaiah's documents and a laptop containing deleted security footage from the night of the initial attack on Adrian's storage unit. "You're under federal arrest for conspiracy, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice," Grant announced, as Price was secured in restraints. For exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, victory seemed certain. The documents were authenticated. Bell received medical treatment at the federal detention facility. Price was formally charged and denied bail. News outlets began reporting that a major corruption investigation had uncovered evidence of fraud involving city officials and private developers. Then Dorsey's allies struck back with devastating precision. Judge Morrison's warrants were vacated by a higher court at 11:15 a.m. The appeals judge ruled that federal jurisdiction had been improperly established and that all evidence obtained during the morning operation was inadmissible. Price was released from custody 30 minutes later on a technicality related to improper arrest procedures. His lawyer claimed federal agents had exceeded their authority and violated his client's constitutional rights. Bell vanished during medical transport to the federal facility. The ambulance driver reported that armed men intercepted the vehicle at a traffic stop. No federal agents were injured, but Bell and his police escort disappeared completely. The final blow came at 2:30 p.m. when edited security footage appeared on every major news network. The video showed Adrian and Solomon's team entering the mall's service areas and appeared to document them placing evidence behind the electrical panel rather than discovering it. The footage was expertly manipulated, but convincing enough to support Dorsey's narrative that the entire federal operation had been an elaborate setup designed to frame innocent city officials. By afternoon, the media had completely reversed its coverage. Headlines screamed about an armed military incursion on private property. Editorial segments questioned whether federal investigators had been duped by a disgraced naval officer seeking revenge against local police. Political commentators debated the dangerous precedent of using active-duty SEALs for domestic law enforcement operations. Adrian's commanding officer called at 4:15 p.m. with orders he'd been dreading. "Commander Mercer, you are directed to surrender yourself to federal authorities immediately for debriefing and administrative review. All SEAL team members under your operational command are confined to base pending investigation." Grant's federal authority was suspended. Rebecca's injunction was overturned. Elena's financial evidence was dismissed as circumstantial. Graham Weller appeared on live television at 5 p.m., standing in front of Hawthorne Galleria with a backdrop of American flags and patriotic bunting. "Tonight's Veterans Fundraiser will proceed as scheduled," he announced to a crowd of supporters. "We will not allow false accusations and military intimidation to undermine our commitment to those who served our nation with honor." The refinancing vote was moved up to 8 p.m., immediately following the fundraiser ceremony. The legal office at Naval Station Norfolk felt like a tomb. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, while Adrian sat in the uncomfortable metal chair, his dress uniform replaced by standard fatigues. The restriction order lay on the desk between him and the duty officer, each typed line another nail in his coffin. "Commander, you understand the severity of these allegations," Lieutenant Colonel Hayes said, without looking up from his paperwork. "Unauthorized use of military personnel for civilian law enforcement, exceeding operational authority, possible conspiracy to plant evidence." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Sir, with respect, those allegations are fabricated by the same corrupt officials we were investigating. That determination is not yours to make." Hayes finally met his eyes. "Until this review is complete, you are confined to base. Captain Vance and his team are restricted from any operations related to your civilian activities." The door opened. Elena entered with Rebecca close behind, both carrying briefcases and wearing the determined expressions Adrian recognized from childhood. "Commander Mercer has legal representation present," Rebecca announced firmly. "We need to discuss new evidence with our client." Hayes gestured toward the conference room. "You have 30 minutes. Elena spread documents across the scratched table the moment the door closed. Her hands shook slightly as she opened Isaiah's recovered ledger to a page filled with seemingly random numbers and letters. "Adrian, do you remember Dad's code?" she whispered. "The one he taught us for treasure hunts when we were kids?" The memory hit him like a physical blow. Summer afternoons in their backyard. Isaiah creating elaborate puzzles that required both children working together. Each sequence of numbers corresponding to letters based on their birth dates and military service numbers. Adrian studied the coded entries. His father had been more careful than anyone realized. "He documented everything twice," Elena explained as Adrian began decoding. "The physical records we found and digital backups stored on a secure server. Look." The decoded sequence revealed an address inside Hawthorne Galleria. Level B2, Cinema Control Booth. Server designation HG Archive 7. The server mirrors all financial transactions and security feeds from the mall's systems, Rebecca added. "It can prove the evidence was never planted because it shows the documents were already there before we arrived." Adrian felt hope rising in his chest. "Where is this server?" "That's the problem," Elena said. "It's programmed to automatically wipe during any major system update. The refinancing vote triggers a complete data purge to eliminate any trace of Weller's illegal activities." Rebecca leaned forward. "There's more. Marcus Bell escaped briefly during transport. He managed to leave a voice message with a contact before they recaptured him. He confirmed the server location and said Weller has armed contractors positioned throughout the mall to prevent anyone from accessing it." The conference room door burst open. Solomon strode in with Grant behind him, both carrying official documents. "Adrian, that restriction order is fake," Solomon announced without preamble. "The Admiral's signature is forged. Real authorization came through 20 minutes ago." Grant placed a federal warrant on the table. "Official FBI investigation into document fraud and impersonation of military authority. The real Admiral wants to speak with you immediately." 10 minutes later, Adrian stood at attention in Admiral Richardson's temporary office, which had been hastily established in the base communications center. "Commander Mercer," Richardson began, his weathered face grim with anger, "someone used my authority to illegally restrict you and your team. That constitutes a federal offense and a direct attack on military command structure." The Admiral's eyes burned with controlled fury. "I'm placing you under federal operational authority effective immediately. Agent Grant has full jurisdiction. Captain Vance and the SEAL team are released from restriction and authorized for domestic counterterrorism operations." Adrian felt the weight of command settling back on his shoulders. "Sir, what are our operational parameters?" "Protect civilian lives, preserve evidence of federal crimes, neutralize any threat to public safety." Richardson's voice carried the authority of 30 years in uniform. "The individuals who forged my signature have declared war on the United States Navy. Show them what that means." Grant stepped forward with tactical communications equipment. "We have confirmation that armed contractors are moving into position around the mall. Bell is being held somewhere inside the building. The fundraiser begins in 2 hours with over 300 civilian attendees." Adrian's mind shifted into operational mode. Years of training took over as he began calculating variables, resources, and tactical approaches. "Solomon, I need building blueprints and entry points. Grant, coordinate with local FBI to establish civilian evacuation routes. Rebecca, prepare to broadcast everything live the moment we access that server." Elena grabbed his arm. "Adrian, be careful. These people killed our father. They won't hesitate to kill you." He covered her hand with his. "Dad taught us to finish what we start. Tonight, we finish this." The sun was setting when 30 SEALs loaded into unmarked vehicles in the base motor pool. Combat gear, night vision, tactical communications, and enough firepower to handle whatever Weller's contractors could deploy. Adrian rode in the lead vehicle with Solomon, watching Norfolk's skyline blur past the windows. No words were needed. They'd planned operations together for years. Each man knew his role. The radio crackled with updates from Grant's surveillance teams. Multiple armed subjects confirmed inside the mall. Civilian evacuation beginning under cover of security sweep. Unknown number of contractors in defensive positions around the cinema complex. Solomon checked his weapon one final time. Rules of engagement? Adrian stared at the approaching lights of Hawthorne Galleria, where his father's truth waited in a control booth, and Marcus Bell needed rescue from the same men who'd destroyed so many lives. "Protect the innocent," Adrian said quietly. "Stop the guilty, no matter what it takes." Evening shoppers strolled through Hawthorne Galleria's gleaming corridors as red, white, and blue banners welcomed guests to the Veterans Fundraiser. Families with children clustered around patriotic displays, while older veterans in dress uniforms gathered near the central stage, where Graham Weller would soon speak. Adrian's convoy stopped in the service lot behind the loading docks, hidden from Weller's security cameras by concrete barriers and delivery trucks. 30 SEALs moved with practiced silence, checking equipment and reviewing building schematics one final time. "Elena and Rebecca are inside," Grant reported through the tactical radio. "Positioned near the broadcast booth on the second level. Federal agents have established perimeters at all major exits." Adrian studied the mall's layout on his tablet. 3 levels, multiple entry points, and hundreds of civilians who had no idea they were walking into a trap. "Solomon, take Alpha Team for civilian evacuation. Keep it subtle until we know what we're facing. Beta Team secures the server room. Charlie Team contains any resistance." Adrian's voice carried the calm authority of countless operations. Priority 1 is civilian safety. Everything else comes second. The SEALs dispersed into the darkness, moving toward freight entrances and service corridors like shadows. Inside the mall, Elena adjusted her purse strap and walked casually toward the upper-level broadcast controls. Rebecca followed 30 feet behind, carrying recording equipment disguised as a shopping bag. The Veterans Fundraiser filled the main concourse with patriotic music and the cheerful chatter of families supporting a good cause. Graham Weller stepped up to the microphone on the central stage, his voice booming through speakers throughout the mall. "Ladies and gentlemen, we gather tonight to honor our brave veterans who sacrificed everything for our freedom." The crowd applauded politely. Elena noticed Chief Dorsey standing near the stage, scanning the crowd with cold eyes. "Unfortunately," Weller continued, his tone shifting darker, "there are those who would exploit our respect for the uniform, dangerous individuals who wear stolen valor like a costume, and threaten the very values we celebrate tonight." Dorsey stepped forward and took the microphone. "We have credible intelligence that a violent extremist group led by Adrian Mercer plans to disrupt this sacred gathering. This man has impersonated a naval officer and recruited armed accomplices to spread lies about our community." Maya Brooks sat with her mother near the fountain, her phone recording everything. She spotted Officer Sloan positioned at the cinema corridor entrance, his hand resting on his weapon. Something was wrong. Sloan kept checking his radio and watching specific exit points, like he was expecting trouble. She quickly texted Elena. "Sloan blocking cinema entrance, armed, looks nervous." Adrian moved through the freight tunnel beneath the mall, his tactical gear allowing him to navigate the darkness silently. Years of SEAL training guided him past electrical panels and water pipes toward the maintenance level, where Marcus Bell was being held. He found the room locked with a heavy chain. Inside, Bell sat bound to a metal chair, his face bruised and swollen. Blood dried on his shirt from interrogation wounds. "Bell," Adrian whispered, cutting the ropes quickly. "Can you move?" Bell nodded weakly. "Holloway's here. He's got explosives planted near the server room. Plan is to blow the evidence and blame you for civilian casualties. Make it look like a terrorist attack by rogue military." Adrian's jaw tightened. The same playbook they'd used against his father escalated to mass murder. Above them, Solomon began moving through the crowd, his team wearing civilian clothes and positioning themselves near families with children. They spoke quietly into hidden radios, coordinating evacuation routes without causing panic. Elena reached the broadcast booth and connected her equipment to the live feed controls. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, copying data streams and preparing to transmit everything the moment they accessed Weller's server. Nolan Price appeared behind her, like a predator. "Step away from that equipment, lady." Rebecca saw Price approaching and immediately pulled the fire alarm. Piercing sirens filled the mall as red lights began flashing throughout every corridor. Price lunged at Elena, grabbing for her laptop, but the alarm had already triggered. Emergency protocols activated across the building's security systems. "Get away from her!" Rebecca shouted, swinging her recording equipment at Price's head. As the alarms wailed through Hawthorne Galleria, Holloway's voice crackled over security radios to every guard and contractor in the building. "Lock all exits immediately. Adrian Mercer has begun his attack. Repeat, we are under assault by armed extremists." The first explosion erupted near the East Wing, shattering windows and sending shoppers screaming toward blocked exits. The smoke thickened like black fog, rolling through Hawthorne Galleria as terrified families pushed against locked exit doors. Children screamed, parents shouted for help. The cheerful fundraiser had turned into chaos in seconds. Adrian pulled Marcus Bell to his feet in the maintenance tunnel. "Can you walk?" "Yeah." Bell wiped blood from his mouth. "But Holloway's got dead man switches on those bombs. If his heart stops, or he loses radio contact, everything blows." Adrian's radio crackled with Solomon's voice. "Commander, exits are sealed. families trapped in the main concourse. "Override them," Adrian ordered, helping Bell toward the emergency ladder. "Use whatever tools you need. Get those people out now." Above ground, Solomon's team moved like precision instruments through the panicking crowd. They carried crowbars and bolt cutters from the maintenance rooms, attacking the magnetic door locks with brutal efficiency. "This way," Solomon called to a mother carrying twin toddlers. "Exit's clear." The woman ran toward the opened door as more families followed. The SEALs worked methodically, opening every blocked route while guiding people away from the smoke-filled East Wing. Then Chief Dorsey's corrupt officers arrived. They burst through the main entrance in tactical gear, weapons drawn, but they weren't targeting the explosion site. They aimed directly at Solomon's team. "Armed suspects in the main concourse," Holloway's voice boomed over their radios. "Engage immediately." Officer Rodriguez fired deliberately toward a group of SEALs, helping elderly veterans escape. The bullets missed the civilians by inches, striking the marble fountain instead. "They're shooting at us!" a teenage girl screamed. Adrian emerged from the maintenance level and saw the setup instantly. The corrupt cops were creating a firefight on camera, hoping the footage would show his team as attackers instead of rescuers. He grabbed his radio. "All teams, funnel them toward the service corridors. Keep them away from families." Adrian sprinted across the upper level, drawing gunfire toward himself. The officers followed, exactly as he'd planned. He ducked behind columns and displays, leading them away from the crowd and into the empty restaurant area. "You want me?" Adrian shouted, disappearing into the kitchen corridor. "Come get me!" The officers pursued him into the narrow service hallways where their numbers meant nothing, and civilian casualties were impossible. Meanwhile, Elena fought desperately with the broadcast equipment as smoke alarms wailed throughout the building. Her laptop showed the fundraiser's live stream was still active, reaching thousands of viewers. Nolan Price grabbed her arm, trying to drag her away from the controls. "You stupid woman! You have no idea what you're messing with." Rebecca swung her recording device again, striking Price in the shoulder. He stumbled, but didn't release Elena. "Let go of her!" Maya Brooks appeared, having run up from the main floor despite the chaos. Price backhanded Maya across the face, sending her crashing into the broadcast panel. But the impact accidentally triggered the live audio feed. "Your father found out about the land theft," Price snarled at Elena, not realizing his voice was now streaming to thousands of viewers. Isaiah Mercer wouldn't keep his mouth shut about the Veterans Cooperative, so we made sure he had that accident on Route 47. Elena's eyes went wide. The confession was broadcasting live to everyone watching the fundraiser stream. "We killed him," Price continued, his rage making him careless. "Just like we're going to kill you and anyone else who threatens Mr. Weller's business." Thousands of viewers heard every word. Comments exploded across social media as people recorded the stream with their phones. Maya wiped blood from her lip and smiled grimly. "You just confessed to murder on live television, you piece of garbage." Price finally realized what had happened. His face went pale as he stared at the broadcasting equipment. Down in the main concourse, Chief Dorsey saw inside the sealed server chamber. Holloway shoved Adrian back from the bomb controls with violent force. The device's red countdown glowed ominously. 4:47, 4:46, 4:45. "Get away from there!" Holloway snarled, his face twisted with desperate rage. "You don't understand what you're messing with." Adrian steadied himself against the server rack, keeping his eyes locked on Holloway's position. "I understand you killed my father. Your old man should have minded his own business." Holloway pulled out his tactical baton, extending it with a sharp click. "I personally went to his house after Price ran him off the road. Took that precious ledger right from his dying hands while he bled out in the ditch." The confession hit Adrian like a physical blow, but he forced his emotions down. His father's final moments, the stolen evidence, the years of lies. "Isaiah begged me to call an ambulance," Holloway continued, circling closer with the baton raised. But Chief Dorsey's orders were clear. No witnesses, no loose ends. Adrian's jaw tightened. "You're going to pay for what you did to him. I'm going to finish what we started." Holloway swung the baton in a vicious arc toward Adrian's injured shoulder. Adrian ducked, but the metal weapon clipped his collarbone. Pain exploded through his left side as Holloway pressed his attack, driving him deeper into the narrow server chamber. 20 years on the force!" Holloway roared, swinging again. "I'm not going to let some uppity Navy boy destroy everything." The baton crashed into Adrian's ribs. He grunted, but absorbed the impact, watching Holloway's rhythm. Every swing came from the same angle, the same telegraphed wind-up. Adrian feinted left, then grabbed Holloway's wrist as the baton came down. He twisted sharply, using the officer's momentum against him. Holloway stumbled forward, crashing into a server rack. Sparks flew as equipment toppled to the floor. "You think you're better than us?" Holloway spun around, blood streaming from his forehead. "Your father thought the same thing." He lunged again, but Adrian was ready. He sidestepped the charge and drove his elbow into Holloway's kidney. The corrupt officer doubled over, gasping. The countdown continued relentlessly. 3:21, 3:20, 3:19. Adrian methodically broke down Holloway's defense. Each strike targeted pressure points and joints, systematic and precise. When Holloway raised the baton overhead, Adrian trapped his arm and twisted until the weapon clattered to the floor. "The control panel," Adrian demanded, forcing Holloway against the bomb device. "Unlock it now." "Go to hell." Adrian applied pressure to Holloway's trapped wrist. "My father's blood is on your hands. Don't make me add yours." Holloway screamed as Adrian increased the pressure. "Okay, okay." With his free hand, Holloway entered a 6-digit code into the control panel. The device beeped, and the security locks disengaged. Above them, Elena's voice crackled through the restored building intercom. "Broadcast is live. Everything's streaming." Adrian grabbed Holloway by the throat and pressed him toward the communication microphone. "Tell them what you just told me." I can't." "Tell them about Isaiah Mercer." Adrian's voice was ice-cold fury. "Tell them how you stole the evidence and left him to die." The pressure on Holloway's windpipe made him gasp out the words. "We killed Isaiah Mercer, took his ledger, covered up the land theft." The confession transmitted live through the building's communication system, reaching the streaming audience Elena had established. Suddenly, Holloway broke free and lunged for the baton on the floor. Adrian caught him in mid-dive, slamming him face first into the concrete wall. Holloway crumpled, unconscious but breathing. The countdown showed 2:43, 2:42, 2:41. Adrian pulled out his father's ledger and found Isaiah's handwritten notes about the building's electrical systems. His father had documented every wire, every circuit, every potential vulnerability. Outside the chamber, gunfire echoed through the parking garage as Solomon battled Price and the armed contractors. Car engines roared as Federal Agent Lila Grant pursued Chief Dorsey and Graham Weller through the emergency exit. Adrian's hands moved carefully over the bomb's wiring, following his father's precise diagrams. Red wire to ground, blue wire bypassed, yellow wire cut at exactly the right junction. 147, 146, 145. His radio crackled with Elena's voice. "Adrian, the circuit diagram shows the green wire connects to the backup timer." Adrian found the green wire and traced it to its source. His father's notes were perfect. Every detail mapped out years in advance. 033, 032, 031. Outside, Dorsey and Weller's getaway vehicle crashed directly into the concrete garage barrier as federal vehicles surrounded them from all directions. 015, 014, 013. Adrian's fingers found the final connection. He cut the wire exactly as his father's notes instructed. The countdown stopped at 003. The server room's computers hummed to life as every stolen record, every hidden transaction, every piece of evidence uploaded automatically to public databases across the Internet. The truth was finally free. The parking garage filled with flashing red and blue lights as emergency crews swarmed Hawthorne Galleria. Paramedics loaded the unconscious Holloway onto a stretcher, while federal agents slapped handcuffs on his wrists. His face was swollen beyond recognition, blood still seeping from where Adrian had slammed him into the concrete wall. "Travis Holloway, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, terrorism, and civil rights violations," Agent Lila Grant announced as cameras rolled. The corrupt officer's eyes fluttered open just long enough to see the media recording his defeat. 20 feet away, Derek Sloan sat in the back of a federal vehicle, his hands shaking as he stared at the ground. The coward who had enabled every abuse was finally facing consequences. No more hiding behind badges or false reports. "I want a lawyer," Sloan mumbled to the agents. "You'll need one," Grant replied coldly. "Multiple federal agencies want to talk to you about the past 5 years." Nolan Price emerged from the garage's lower level in handcuffs, his mall security uniform torn and blood-stained from his fight with Solomon. The man who had forced Isaiah Mercer's car off the road decades ago could barely walk. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle where Solomon had broken it during their brutal encounter. "Price killed my father," Adrian said as the former detective was dragged past. "Make sure that charge sticks." Price looked up with hatred burning in his eyes. "Your old man should have minded his own business." Solomon stepped forward, his SEAL training barely containing his rage. "Say that again." Price wisely kept his mouth shut as agents shoved him into the transport vehicle. The biggest catch waited by the garage entrance. Graham Weller sat in federal custody, his expensive suit ruined and his billionaire confidence completely shattered. Chief Calvin Dorsey slumped beside him, the corrupt police chief's authority stripped away forever. 23 counts of conspiracy, Agent Grant read from her tablet as reporters pressed closer. Racketeering, murder, theft of federal property, and domestic terrorism. Weller's lawyer tried to push through the crowd. "My client has no comment at this time." "He'll have plenty of comments under oath," Grant replied. She held up a thick folder of documents. "We have his signed confession, recorded testimony from Marcus Bell, and every financial transaction dating back 15 years. Bell had survived the garage shootout with a bullet wound to his shoulder. As paramedics treated him, he gave a complete statement to federal investigators. The former security contractor's guilt had finally broken through his fear. "I watched them plan Isaiah Mercer's death," Bell testified on camera. "Dorsey gave the order. Price carried it out. Weller paid for the cover-up." His words would become the foundation of the prosecution's case. The media frenzy reached its peak when Maya Brooks stepped forward with her unedited recording. The young teacher's footage showed the entire arrest sequence, from Holloway's racist taunts to Adrian's dignified responses. "This proves Commander Mercer never resisted arrest," Maya announced to the cameras. "He was targeted because of his investigation, not his behavior." Elena's livestream had captured even more damaging evidence. Every confession, every threat, every moment of the conspiracy's final collapse had been broadcast to thousands of viewers. The Internet exploded with support for Adrian and demands for justice. Within hours, federal prosecutors announced a sweeping investigation. Weller Development Corporation was dissolved by court order. The forged property deeds were declared invalid. The stolen veterans' land would be returned to the surviving families of the original cooperative. "This represents the largest civil rights settlement in the state's history," Rebecca Hale told reporters outside the federal courthouse. The civil rights attorney had worked around the clock to ensure proper legal procedures were followed. The veterans' families would finally get their justice. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.